Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you have ever wondered what life looked like behind the polished windows of a 1,950-second suburban home, tonight you are in the right place. So go ahead, settle into your favorite spot, loosen your shoulders, let your mind drift gently, because we are about to step into a world that feels familiar in photographs, nostalgic in old magazines, yet surprisingly complicated when you peek behind the curtains. Welcome to an era where the idea of the perfect home was not just an aspiration. It was almost a performance, one staged daily by millions of women across neighborhoods that seemed identical from street to street. And in that performance, every little detail mattered, from the shine on the kitchen counter to the fold of a bed sheet to the pair of gloves chosen for a late morning grocery run. But before we wander through those pastel living rooms and step into those immaculate kitchens, let us take a gentle breath and imagine the era itself. Picture a quiet morning in 1956. The sun is soft, the neighborhood is still, and the world seems to move at a slower rhythm than the fast-paced noise of today. A radio hums from somewhere, likely a cheerful song or a friendly voice announcing the weather. Cars rumble awake one by one, each heading toward the same direction, toward work, toward routine, toward predictability. And inside nearly every home, there is someone moving with purpose, setting the stage for the day. She wakes before the house stirs. Even before the first child shifts under a blanket or the husband rustles the morning paper, she is already up. Maybe she smooths her dress. Maybe she ties her hair neatly. Maybe she checks the mirror not out of vanity, but out of habit, because presentation is part of the rhythm. There is nothing inherently dramatic about it. It is simply what the culture expects. Gently, but firmly, she steps into the kitchen, where everything must look as if it belongs exactly where it sits. The counters, the stove, the dishes, drying on the rack, everything is part of a visual language that reassures the outside world. This home is well cared for, and that idea that the home must constantly reassure outsiders is the heart of the 1,950 seconds housewife's experience. It was not only about washing dishes or folding laundry. It was about maintaining an image of harmony, calm, warmth, and order. It was a performance, not in the sense of acting falsely, but in the sense of executing a routine that society insisted was the gold standard. And like any performance, it had costumes, props, timing, and an invisible audience who always noticed whether you hit the right cues. What is fascinating is that this performance did not happen on a stage. It unfolded quietly, softly, almost invisibly within the walls of the home, yet it was just as demanding as any public role. For example, there was a certain way the living room should look even if no guests were coming. The pillows needed fluffing. The magazines needed aligning. The flowers on the coffee table, whether fresh or carefully arranged, artificial ones, needed to face outward, not inward. A family photo tilted too far to the right might not cause alarm, but it would bother her until she fixed it. Not because she was fussy, but because the home itself felt like an extension of her own reputation. If she walked into the bedroom, she would not simply straighten the sheets. There was a method, a system, a sequence that had been quietly passed down through magazines, etiquette guides, neighbors, and unspoken norms. Sheets had to be tucked in tight, corners folded to crisp angles, blankets smoothed without visible creases. The bed was not just a place to sleep. It was a symbol, a tiny declaration that this household remained orderly, balanced, proud, and capable. And yet, beneath those daily rituals, there was something deeper happening, something unspoken, something a little more human. Because while the image of the 1950 seconds housewife often glows with a soft, nostalgic charm, pearls, aprons, soft smiles, the reality behind that charm could be far more layered. Many women felt the constant pressure to live up to the picture-perfect ideal. It was not enough to clean. It had to look effortless. It was not enough to cook. The meal had to feel welcoming, balanced, inviting. It was not enough to be a caring partner or parent. One had to seem endlessly patient, endlessly composed, endlessly gracious. And that is the part of the story that truly opens a window into this world. This was not just about work, it was about expectations. Expectations that came from magazines, television shows, neighbors, family elders, and sometimes even from within. The idea of the good home carried meaning success, stability, respectability. And the person at the center of that image, the woman managing the home, carried that meaning on her shoulders. Now, do not get me wrong. Many women took pride in their homes, genuinely. There was true craftsmanship in the way they managed daily life. It was not always burdensome. Sometimes it was joyful. Folding laundry in the warm afternoon breeze, preparing a family dinner that filled the house with comforting scents, decorating a small corner of the living room. These acts could bring satisfaction. They were not meaningless. They were expressions of care. But the point is, the performance side of domestic life, the insistence on perfection, the pressure to maintain appearances, the idea that every detail could reflect your worth, added a weight that often went unnoticed by the world around them. And that is why this topic is so interesting, even now. Because when we pause and look closely, we realize that the immaculate 1950 seconds home was not just a physical space. It was a stage built on expectations, a place where the smallest decisions conveyed messages. A polished wooden floor was not just clean. It said, "This home is under control." A perfectly arranged dining table was not simply for dinner. It silently declared, "This family is thriving." Even the pair of gloves resting near the door said something, that she knew the etiquette, that she belonged, that she understood the social language of the era. Let us walk deeper into that moment again. Imagine her stepping into the hallway, where a row of gloves sits neatly on a tray. One pair is for errands, durable enough for shopping, but still elegant. Another pair is for social visits, pastel, delicate, appropriate. A third pair might be for special occasions, the sort of gloves one brings out only when the afternoon promises company. And she knows, instinctively, without looking at a rule book, exactly which pair matches which moment. Because in that world, gloves were not only accessories, they were symbols. They spoke without words. Wearing the wrong pair was not a disaster, of course, but it invited raised eyebrows, gentle whispers, perhaps even a quiet moment of judgment from a neighbor who always seemed to notice everything. It was not malicious, it was just the culture. A culture where image shaped identity. And for many women, participating in that image felt natural. They had grown up absorbing it from the world around them. But others felt its weight more deeply, the subtle sense that they were always being observed, measured, compared. Not in dramatic ways, but in tiny, quiet moments that accumulated through the day. This is the angle that makes the 1950 seconds housewife story more than just nostalgic decor and vintage charm. It is a story about people, about the invisible expectations society places on individuals, and the ways people learn to live within those expectations. Some embrace them. Some resist them. Some carry them like small stones in their pockets, barely noticeable at first, but heavier over time. And tonight, as we explore this world gently and slowly, we are not here to judge it or to romanticize it. We are here to understand it, to see why these rituals existed, why they mattered, and what they reveal about an era that shaped generations after it. We are here to recognize the effort, the grace, the humor, the challenges, the contradictions, all woven into the quiet choreography of daily life inside those tidy suburban homes. So as we begin this journey, imagine yourself stepping through the front door of a pastel 1950 seconds house. The air smells faintly of fresh laundry. A soft melody floats from the radio. The living room is perfectly arranged. The kitchen glows with the warm light of a morning sun. And somewhere in this home, a woman is already 3 steps into her daily routine, carrying the weight of an ideal she did not invent, yet one she must uphold. Tonight, we will follow her path gently, to understand not only what she did, but why she did it, and what the world expected from her. And as we walk with her, we might even recognize echoes of her world in our own. If the first idea introduces us to the stage like nature of the 1950 seconds home, then idea 2 brings us deeper into the choreography, the way ordinary tasks were transformed into detailed rituals that shaped the rhythm of each day. To understand the world of the 1950 seconds housewife, you have to imagine that nearly everything she touched came with a right way, an unspoken method perfected through habit, cultural expectation, and endless repetition. Let us drift slowly into her morning again. She does not simply start the day, she follows a sequence. There is an order to how she opens the curtains, when she warms the kettle, how she places the cups on the table. None of this is written in any official rulebook. Yet these steps were woven deeply into the fabric of her daily world. Even something as simple as wiping a counter was not just a swipe of a cloth. It was a demonstration of calm control, of attentiveness, of dedication to the household she was expected to maintain. Take the kitchen, for example. To you and me, it is a functional space, a place to cook, chat, maybe leave a mess if we are in a hurry. But to her, the kitchen was a canvas where each task had its own ritual. Preparing breakfast was not about scrambling eggs and pouring cereal. It was about timing, presentation, and composure. The plates had to warm slightly from the heat of the stove so the food stayed appealing. Toast could not be placed flat on a plate where it would soften. It went onto a small rack so it kept its crispness. The butter did not stay in its wrapper. It was transferred into a smooth dish, then placed neatly alongside the proper utensil. Coffee was not simply poured, it was served first to the family, never to herself. These gestures may seem small, even unnecessary, but in her world, they formed the structure of a day that otherwise could feel formless. Each ritual anchored her sense of purpose, and perhaps even brought a moment of comfort in the predictability. After all, when so much of her role was tied to intangible ideals, grace, composure, warmth, reliability, these little rituals became markers that she was succeeding, even if only privately. Move with her into the living room. Here, another set of rituals unfolds. Magazines stacked at precise angles, throw pillows fluffed and repositioned. A small decorative bowl of mints refilled, not because someone would surely eat one, but because it looked inviting, complete, finished. The record player dusted gently. The curtains opened to allow the perfect amount of morning light in, not too harsh, not too dim. Then there was the laundry. In our modern world, laundry is often the chore we squeeze in between meetings, errands, or late-night episodes of a show. But in the 1950 seconds home, it was a structured process. Stains had their own removal methods. Whites required boiling or sun bleaching. Fabrics needed sorting not just by color, but by weight and delicacy. When laundry was hung outside, it was not simply tossed onto the line. It was arranged. Sheets in the center, where they could catch the most sun. Socks paired and hung neatly. Underclothes hidden behind towels or linens, because modesty extended even to laundry lines visible from a neighbor's yard. This ritualization was not forced. It emerged naturally from the culture. When every neighbor could see your line, when every passing car could catch a glimpse of your backyard, laundry became yet another quiet announcement of your skill, your care, your social understanding. And while no one spoke openly about it, women knew. A messy line suggested disorganization. An immaculate one suggested pride. Even cleaning had its rituals. Dusting was not about removing dust. It was about maintaining an atmosphere. She dusted the radio because it should not look neglected. She polished the dining table not just to keep it clean, but to keep it glowing. She swept the front porch because that was the first thing visitors saw. She did not rush through these tasks. She moved through them steadily, almost meditatively, like someone tending to a garden of small details. Perhaps the most iconic ritual of all was the bed making. A bed was not just made. It was constructed. The sheets laid tight enough to pass the smooth hand test, where a single sweep of the palm revealed any imperfections. Pillows, arranged in a way that seemed to announce, "This space is peaceful." The comforter folded back at the exact angle shown in magazines. The result was a bed that did not just look neat, it looked intentional, poised, almost ceremonial. Why did these rituals matter so much? Because they allowed her to create a sense of order in a life where she did not always have control. The world outside her front door was changing technology, politics, culture, but inside her home, the rituals stayed steady. They were the heartbeat of her day. And beyond personal comfort, these rituals connected her to other women around her. A woman could walk into a friend's home and understand, instantly, the gentle pride in a spotless stove, the familiarity of perfectly arranged curtains, the hours behind a well-made bed. They were speaking the same quiet language one formed through routine, repetition, and shared experience. Were these rituals exhausting? Sometimes. Were they meaningful? Often, yes. They gave her identity within a structure that expected her to serve without explicitly praising her. They gave her a rhythm when interruptions and surprises could easily overwhelm her. They gave her a sense of worth in a culture that did not always acknowledge the emotional labor inside the home. And, perhaps most importantly, these rituals transformed the home into a sanctuary, not only for her family, but also for herself. In each polished surface, each folded towel, each swept porch, she left a small note to herself. I am keeping things together. And in the 1,950 seconds, that message mattered more than most people realized. And when we follow her a little deeper into her day, we begin to see how these rituals were not just isolated routines, but interconnected parts of a larger rhythm that guided the entire household. If the kitchen and living room were the prologue, then the bed, the breakfast table, and the laundry line were the main chapters of her daily script, each one with its own expectations, textures, and little secrets. This is where the quiet, beauty, and hidden pressure of her world become clearest. Let us start with the bed, because in many ways it was the first canvas she worked on each morning. She did not simply pull the blanket up and call it done. She approached the bed the way a craftsperson approaches a familiar project. There was a sequence. Smooth the sheet, tighten the sides, Pinch the corners. Fold the top just so. Lay the pillows in a gentle, welcoming arc. To a modern eye, it might appear like fussing over details, but for her, it was not about fuss. It was about intention. It was about creating a space that felt calm, predictable, and almost ceremonial. A well-made bed did not only look neat, it made the entire room feel grounded. It declared that the day had begun properly. There is something quietly poetic about how she approached this moment. While the rest of the world hurried toward deadlines, traffic, and buzzing offices, she worked in a world where order was created by hands, fabric, and instinct. Perhaps, as she smoothed the blanket, she also smoothed a part of her own mind, preparing herself for the hours ahead. From the bedroom, she would drift back toward the kitchen, where the breakfast table waited. This was not a chaotic rush of cereal boxes and mismatched plates. Breakfast, in the 1,950 seconds household she managed, was a gentle ritual of hospitality, even if the guests were simply her own family members. Every item on the table had a purpose: toast, crisp and elevated on a small rack, butter in a dish rather than a wrapper, utensils placed in alignment, coffee poured with quiet precision. She did not do this to impress strangers. She did it because this was the norm. This was how mornings were meant to feel. And as she moved from the stove to the table, she was not just serving food. She was maintaining a certain emotional tone within the home. A calm breakfast suggested a calm day. A thoughtful table suggested care. The family might not always say it out loud, but they felt it. And in a world where so much of her value was measured in subtle atmospheres and quiet impressions, these moments mattered. After breakfast, the energy of the house shifted, and it was time for the next chapter, the laundry. Today, laundry is often squeezed between obligations, tossed into machines that hum while we check our phones. But in her world, laundry was an activity with structure, expectation, and meaning. She sorted carefully, not just by color, but by purpose. The children's clothes needed durability. The husband's shirts needed crispness. Towels required extra sun for freshness. And when she carried the basket outside, the backyard transformed into a stage visible to the entire neighborhood. The laundry line, fluttering in the afternoon breeze, was more than a place to dry clothes. It was a silent statement. Neatly hung sheets meant competence. Paired socks meant attentiveness. Hidden under clothes meant modesty and discretion. Neighbors might not say anything aloud, but everyone noticed. In that quiet suburban world, a laundry line could speak as clearly as any conversation. She moved with ease, clipping clothespins in smooth, practiced motions. The fresh scent of soap and sunlight wrapped around her. Even though it was work, physical work that pulled at the arms and legs, there was also a sense of satisfaction in watching the garments sway gently against the sky. The laundry line was not only a domestic task. It was a reflection of her presence in the home, a kind of visual signature that lingered in the afternoon air. What is striking about these three scenes, the bed, the breakfast table, and the laundry line, is how deeply they reveal the emotional landscape of her life. None of these tasks were dramatic, but each carried layers of meaning. To an outsider, her day might have seemed simple, repetitive even, but beneath the repetitive motions were small choices, small acts of care, small signals of identity. And though the modern world often looks back on this era with nostalgia, imagining it as a time of simplicity, the truth is a bit more delicate. Her life was full of expectations that were rarely acknowledged but always felt. The perfect bed was not just about neatness. The breakfast table was not just about nourishment. The laundry line was not just about drying clothes. All of these things formed a kind of language, a quiet, unspoken dialogue between her and the world around her, between who she was and who she was expected to be. In these everyday rituals, you can sense both the comfort and the weight of her role. There was pride in doing things well, in creating beauty from routine, but there was also the invisible pressure of knowing that others were watching, comparing, interpreting. And yet, through all of this, she carried herself with grace. She moved steadily, adjusting, performing, maintaining a rhythm that kept her home running smoothly. Even when no one noticed the tiny details, she noticed them. Even when no one praised the quiet beauty she created each day, she felt the importance of it. It is this combination of invisible labor, subtle skill, and gentle devotion that makes her world so fascinating to revisit. Not because it was perfect, far from it, but because it was human. Because these small, everyday acts were her way of shaping a world that demanded so much of her while giving her so little public acknowledgement in return. So as we continue exploring the intricate patterns of 1,950 seconds domestic life, keep these images in mind. The smooth bed, the welcoming breakfast table, the fluttering laundry line. They are not just chores. They are symbols. They are signals. They are the quiet chapters of a story lived by millions of women whose work formed the heartbeat of their homes. As her day continued, moving from one careful task to the next, something else hovered quietly in the background, something harder to see but impossible to ignore once you understand her world. It was the awareness that every gesture, every choice, every tiny detail existed not only for the comfort of her family, but also within a web of silent expectations woven through the community around her. In the 1,950 seconds home, etiquette was not simply about being polite. It was about performing an unspoken role, a role that offered stability on the surface while demanding constant vigilance beneath it. If you picture her stepping out to greet a neighbor or host a small gathering, she was not simply offering a friendly smile. She was carrying an entire script. How she held herself, when she paused, how she welcomed someone across the threshold. These things expressed more than warmth. They expressed competence. They said, "I understand the rhythm here." And in her world, understanding the rhythm meant belonging. Take something as small as offering refreshments to a visitor. In her world, offering a drink was not a casual gesture. There was a specific flow. The guest was offered something first. Choices were presented gently. Cups were placed with the handle facing outward. Napkins laid lightly beside them. These were not written rules carved into stone. They were cultural echoes, habits absorbed from mothers, magazines, neighborhood gatherings, and the silent approval that came from doing things the right way. But the interesting part is how this script was not only social, it was emotional. Following the etiquette was not just about appearing proper. It was a way of navigating a society where women were expected to maintain harmony, build community, and keep the fabric of everyday life from fraying. These gestures, though small, were her tools. Tools to create peace, to show competence, to avoid criticism, and sometimes even to protect herself from subtle judgment. Because yes, judgment existed. Not loud, confrontational judgment, but the soft, whispering kind that passed through a neighborhood like a light breeze. The kind that could begin when someone noticed an uncut lawn, a mismatched table setting, or a moment of visible disorganization. No one would say anything directly. It simply lingered in conversations, in raised eyebrows, in soft sighs exchanged at the grocery store. And she understood, instinctively, that part of her role was to avoid letting those little moments attach themselves to her family's name. This is where the idea of etiquette becomes more complex. It was not merely about doing things nicely. It was about managing perception, maintaining social balance, and ensuring her household fit the mold of stability that the era valued so highly. Every gesture, from how she answered the phone to how she placed a dessert on the table, was part of a broader performance designed to communicate a message. Everything here is fine. Everything here is in order. But was everything always fine? Not necessarily. Life, even in the prettiest homes and most polished kitchens, is never as flawless as the magazine suggested. Children fought. Plans fell apart. Meals burned. Fatigue crept in. Yet the expectation remained that she would handle these things with grace, with a steady calmness that did not show the strain beneath the surface. That pressure, gentle but persistent, shaped her days more than many people realized. And yet, within this pressure, there was also a strange kind of power. Etiquette gave her a language. It gave her a way to navigate social spaces, to form bonds with other women, to influence the emotional atmosphere of a gathering without raising her voice or asserting authority in ways the culture would not encourage. Through etiquette, she maintained harmony, avoided conflict, and kept her home within the quiet center of community life. This was especially clear during events like the famous Tupperware parties, small social gatherings that were part sales pitch, part community ritual. These parties might sound trivial today, but back then they were opportunities for women to step into a space where they could share, connect, earn a bit of income, and temporarily become the center of attention. Hosting a party was not just about showing off colorful containers. It was about demonstrating hospitality, leadership, and competence. The success of the gathering carried a quiet weight, one that shaped how she was viewed in the circles that mattered to her. And these circles did matter, not because they were glamorous, but because they formed the foundation of her world. Neighborhoods were tightly knit, information moved quickly, and reputation shaped everything from friendships to support networks to small everyday interactions. A well-run home was not just a home. It was proof that she understood the subtle rules of belonging. And while that might seem exhausting today, to her, it was simply the environment she lived within, the quiet ecosystem she had learned to navigate with practiced grace. But beneath all of this, beneath the performance, the etiquette, the whispers, the subtle social balancing, there was something deeply human. Many women found comfort in the rituals, in the slow care of daily life, in the pride of welcoming guests into a space they shaped with their own hands. Others felt the strain more sharply, sensing that the demands were heavier than they appeared, that the expectations sometimes outweighed the appreciation. Both feelings were real, and both coexisted quietly within the same world. In the end, etiquette in the 1950 seconds household was not just about politeness. It was a kind of quiet survival, a way to maintain calm, to navigate social landscapes, to protect one's reputation, and to fulfill expectations that were rarely spoken aloud, but always understood. It was a dance she performed daily, one she learned without formal lessons, one she carried with an elegance that outsiders often overlooked. And as we continue through the rest of her day, we will begin to see even more clearly how these small, carefully executed gestures reveal not just the surface of her life, but also the emotional layers beneath it, layers made of pride, pressure, dedication, and the unspoken wish to be seen, even in a world that often expected her to stay quietly perfect. As the world beyond her home continued to move forward, slowly reshaping itself through new technologies, new ideas, and new cultural winds, The life she lived inside those quiet suburban walls did not stay untouched forever. Change arrived, not abruptly, not dramatically, but in subtle ripples, small signs that the rhythm she knew so well was beginning to shift. And even though the 1,950 seconds were built on predictability, these ripples eventually grew into soft waves that touched every corner of domestic life. Picture her standing in her kitchen one afternoon. The light through the curtains has not changed. The sound of the radio has not changed. The scent of warm bread or simmering soup has not changed. But somewhere on that radio, a new kind of voice occasionally appears. A commentator speaking about women working outside the home, or the growing number of conveniences meant to save time, or the slow but steady transformation of the modern household. She listens, not always fully understanding the implications, but she feels something stirring beneath the calm surface of her world. The first major shift was technology, small inventions that promised to lighten the load she carried every day. A new kind of washing machine, a vacuum cleaner that hummed more efficiently, a mix for cakes that reduced prep time. Magazine ads portrayed these tools as her new companions, her little helpers. And while she still performed most of the household rituals with care and precision, these inventions slowly loosened the tight grip of tradition. But the deeper change was not in machines. It was in mindset. As the next decade began to form on the horizon, women across the country started to question the structure that had quietly shaped their lives. They were not rejecting the art of keeping a home. They were simply asking, "Must this be my only space?" It was not rebellion. It was not loud. It was more like a thoughtful pause, a moment where they looked up from the laundry line, from the polished counter, from the carefully arranged table setting, and realized the world was expanding, and society, slowly, began to respond. Magazines that once focused only on perfect roast recipes began to include articles about community involvement, personal interests, even part-time careers. Not much at first, just small, cautious steps. But they were steps nonetheless, and she noticed them. At the same time, some things did not change. Not immediately. The expectations around appearance, the well-kept house, the polite greeting, the subtle social rituals still lingered. They softened, perhaps, but they did not disappear. A tidy home still suggested stability. A fluffed pillow still symbolized care. A composed demeanor still signaled competence. And even as the outer world changed, these inner symbols clung quietly to the heart of the household. This is where the story becomes especially interesting. Because while the 1,950 seconds domestic ideal eventually evolved, it did not vanish. It simply shifted into new forms. The pressure to maintain a perfect home did not disappear overnight. It migrated into the next decades, then the next, adjusting itself to each new era. Today, it might not be polished silverware or crisp laundry lines that define the ideal. Instead, it might be color-coordinated spaces on social media, curated shelves, spotless countertops in online posts. The format changed, but the instinct to present an orderly life to the world stayed surprisingly familiar. And she, standing in her kitchen or folding linen on the couch, could never have predicted how future generations would reinterpret her rituals. The women who came after her gained options she never had. Careers, independence, choices. They stepped into workplaces, universities, and creative worlds once closed to them. And yet, echoes of her life remain in small, modern habits. The instinct to tidy before guests arrive, the satisfaction of a freshly made bed, the quiet pride in a meal prepared with care. It is almost as if parts of her world were passed down like heirlooms, not physical items, but rhythms, values, and subtle gestures. That instinct to create a peaceful home environment, it came from her. The small joy of lighting a candle at the end of the day, also from her. The way we sometimes straighten things without thinking, or arrange pillows in a certain way, or admire the feeling of a clean space, these are her gifts, tucked gently into the corners of modern life. But the most important shift is how the meaning of these rituals changed. For her, they were obligations supported by societal expectations. For us, they can be choices, acts. We perform for comfort, for beauty, for ourselves. What once felt like a requirement now can be a form of personal expression. And that difference between duty and choice is what truly separates her world from ours. Still, it is impossible not to feel a sense of admiration when looking back on the grace with which she navigated her role. Even as the world asked her to maintain order, composure, and quiet perfection, she managed to create warmth, community, and stability for the people she loved. Her rituals may have been shaped by pressure, but the heart behind them was shaped by care. And as the modern world continues to evolve, layering new expectations atop old ones, it is valuable to pause and reflect on how far we have come and how much of her world quietly lingers in ours. The pace has changed, the tools have changed, the roles have changed, but the desire to create spaces that feel safe and comforting remains deeply human. So as we move forward into the next chapter of her story, into the lessons she unknowingly left behind, it becomes clear that what changed was not just society around her, but the understanding of what it means to build a life with intention. Some pieces of her world faded with time. Others remained, reimagined in new forms. And many continue to whisper softly through modern routines, reminding us that even in a world of rapid change, the quiet rituals of care still matter. Stepping outside the home, the world opened up in a different dimension of challenges. Inside, she had her gloves, her aprons, her carefully arranged pillows, and her rituals, a controlled environment where she could, with skill and discipline, maintain order. Outside, in the neighborhood streets, grocery stores, church halls, and Tupperware gatherings, she was under a different kind of scrutiny. A quiet, pervasive observation from the eyes of friends, neighbors, and even strangers. In the 1,950 seconds suburban environment, the act of leaving your home was a performance as intricate as any chore inside it. Even the simplest tasks, like walking to the mailbox or collecting eggs from the backyard, carried social weight. Each encounter, however brief, required an unspoken script. How she held herself, what she wore, how she responded to greetings, even her pace along the sidewalk, communicated messages about her competence, her social awareness, and her commitment to maintaining appearances. It was as if every action was measured against an invisible scorecard maintained collectively by the neighborhood. Take, for instance, the act of grocery shopping. On the surface, it seems mundane, yet in her world, the aisles were arenas of social observation. Selecting fruit, opening a can, or reaching for the final loaf of bread all demanded careful negotiation of social signals. If she appeared too casual, it suggested laziness or carelessness. Too meticulous, and it might hint at obsession or superiority. She had to walk a fine line, balancing efficiency with propriety, practicality with poise. Observant neighbors would notice, subtly passing judgment, whispering evaluations that would ripple through the community over the following days. And at events like church socials or bridge clubs, the stakes escalated further. Here, every conversation, gesture, and laugh was an expression of social literacy. She needed to participate, to nod at the correct moments, to laugh at the proper intervals, and to offer praise in measured doses. One misstep, a delayed laugh, a too enthusiastic opinion, a misaligned dessert plate could attract the delicate kind of criticism that lingered far longer than any actual offense warranted. Etiquette had transformed from personal ritual into a tool of diplomacy. Mastering it meant she could navigate these micro-politics without outwardly challenging anyone, protecting her reputation and that of her family. Yet, amidst these rigid expectations, there was a subtle empowerment. Observation allowed her to read people, to anticipate their reactions, and to maneuver through social situations with skill that few appreciated. She became adept at understanding undercurrents, noting which neighbor preferred silence, who thrived on conversation, who might be swayed by compliments or deference. In this way, her awareness of etiquette was both a shield and a map. It was survival, yes, but also a way to exert influence without confrontation. Public appearances also extended to seemingly minor domestic displays visible from the street. A perfectly mowed lawn, a neatly arranged flower bed, laundry billowing crisply on the clothesline. These were signals as potent as her conversation skills. Each detail sent a message. I am attentive. I am orderly. I care for my home and family. Fail to maintain these, and whispers of neglect might spread, subtle yet powerful. Success meant not only pride in one's own work, but a quiet affirmation of social standing. The subtle power of observation was equally critical in managing relationships with men in social settings. At neighborhood barbecues, discussions about gardening, lawn care, or even car repairs became arenas where women navigated carefully. She had to listen attentively, respond politely, and avoid showing undue knowledge that might disrupt the expected social hierarchy. Laugh at the wrong joke or offer the wrong advice, and she risked unsettling the delicate balance of neighborhood interactions. But listen well, nod strategically, and her perceptiveness became a quiet currency of influence, a demonstration of her social intelligence that was rarely recognized openly. Another layer of complexity arose with the management of in-laws and extended family. A visit from a mother-in-law, for example, was an event requiring careful choreography. Seating arrangements, dish placement, and the measured delivery of conversation all mattered. She had to anticipate questions, serve favorite dishes while maintaining plausible deniability for shortcuts, and ensure the family appeared harmonious. These moments were not merely about domestic duties. They were exercises in strategic diplomacy. Success meant harmony, survival, and subtle reinforcement of her household status. Failure, even minor, could echo in whispered remarks and polite corrections long after the visit ended. Throughout these public rituals, a recurring theme emerged: the subtle tension between appearance and reality. Within the home, she could manage the environment directly, straighten the pillows, dust the shelves, iron the linens. Outside, the rules were invisible, yet strictly enforced by the gaze of others. The challenge was to project composure and control even when circumstances were chaotic. Children running wild, a dog misbehaving, or a dropped item became opportunities to practice poise and discretion. Observers rarely saw the effort, only the seamless result. The rituals extended even further to leisure and entertainment. Hosting, participating in games, attending card clubs, all demanded a quiet mastery of social navigation. Guests' behaviors had to be anticipated. Conversations directed subtly. Laughter and approval metered precisely. The home and public engagements were both stages on which her skills were silently displayed and evaluated. Etiquette was not just about following rules. It was about performing competence, emotional intelligence, and relational diplomacy at every turn. Even as she moved through these routines, there was an undercurrent of tension. The standards of the 1,950 seconds demanded near perfection. Yet her capacity, like everyone's, had limits. The day was punctuated by small crises, a misbehaving appliance, a burned dish, a minor wardrobe mishap, each requiring rapid recovery. The key lay in controlling the perception of failure. Quick fixes, polite diversions, and subtle improvisation allowed her to maintain the appearance of grace under pressure, a skill as essential as any domestic ritual. This balance of careful observation, meticulous performance, and subtle influence defined much of a woman's public life in the 1,950 seconds. It demanded attentiveness, patience, and ingenuity. While we may laugh today at the absurdity of such pressures, they reveal the sophisticated, unspoken knowledge women had to cultivate a mastery of social physics, the art of reading people and situations, and the ability to project competence and harmony in every encounter. By the end of her day, after navigating these public rituals, she had survived multiple layers of judgment, both overt and invisible. The grocery store aisles, the church halls, the neighborly visits, the casual walks down the street, all were arenas where etiquette dictated the stakes. Yet her success in this landscape was not measured in applause, but in the seamless continuation of her world, a household maintained, a social network engaged, and the quiet satisfaction of having negotiated the invisible codes of suburban life. In this way, public life became an extension of the home, a stage where every small action, glance, and gesture was both communication and defense. The 1,950-second suburban woman operated in a constant interplay of observation and performance, judgment and mastery, pressure and pride. Each day was a complex choreography of subtle rituals, small victories, and constant attention to detail. And though it might seem exhausting from our modern perspective, she thrived within it. Her skills honed to a quiet, extraordinary level of social acuity. Her life reminds us that etiquette, while often trivialized today, was in her era a sophisticated system of negotiation, influence, and survival, a testament to the invisible labor of observation and subtle power that underpinned much of daily life in the 1,950 seconds. Stepping beyond the home's domestic rituals, a 1,950 seconds housewife faced perhaps her most intricate challenge: the cultivation of children who could navigate the same web of social expectations she herself endured daily. Children were not merely little humans in need of care. They were apprentices in etiquette, observers of subtle social codes, and extensions of the family's reputation. Every spilled milk, whispered word, or unpolished shoe could echo through the neighborhood and be interpreted as a reflection of the mother's competence. Mornings began with careful preparation. Each child's hair was combed, collars straightened, and shoes polished to a reflective gleam. Socks were pulled up, and small hands were reminded to remain folded or to participate in chores with exactness. The aim was to produce a tableau of order children who moved with the precision and composure expected in public, yet retained enough vitality to survive the unpredictability of suburban life. In this world, a child's behavior was a public declaration, an ongoing audit of familial decorum. Discipline was both subtle and omnipresent. A sharp glance, a raised eyebrow, or a pointed, careful now conveyed volumes more than overt scolding. Yet consequences were immediate and clear. Misbehavior at the table, incorrect posture in church, or a slip of honesty at a social gathering could result in silent corrections, withdrawal of privileges, or tactical threats such as postponed dessert. Children quickly learned that missteps were not just personal mistakes, they carried social weight. Beyond immediate correction, children absorbed lessons through observation. Watching their mother navigate breakfast table etiquette, host a tea, or manage an unexpected neighbor's visit, they internalized strategies for composure, conversation, and conflict avoidance. Even in play, they mirrored these social dynamics, negotiating disputes over toys, strategizing small deceptions to avoid punishment, and practicing polite expressions with peers. The home thus became a microcosm of the wider society, a classroom where social fluency was taught not through lectures, but through immersive experience. Education in etiquette extended to meals. Children were trained to sit upright, napkins in laps, hands placed correctly, and voices modulated appropriately. Compliments were offered only when deemed necessary. Opinions were carefully moderated. Any divergence, however minor, a loud burp, a blunt comment, or an offhand expression of preference was met with immediate social correction. Over time, children developed an acute awareness of what behaviors were acceptable, who could be trusted to enforce rules, and how to navigate interpersonal tension without attracting negative attention. This training, while demanding, instilled valuable skills. Children learned observation, patience, timing, and subtle communication. They became experts at reading facial expressions, discerning intent, and calibrating their own reactions. The lessons were not just about politeness. They were lessons in strategy, empathy, and social survival. A 5-year-old who could smoothly navigate a tea party was demonstrating cognitive and emotional intelligence beyond mere childhood learning. Yet the pressures of perfection were significant. One misstep, whether at the PTA meeting, church event, or neighborly gathering, could mark a child in the eyes of the community. Mothers meticulously prepared children for these encounters, teaching them phrases, guiding their gestures, and modeling composure. Failure was instructive, often followed by quiet reflection or corrective rehearsal in the safe space of home. Success, however, was a subtle victory, a moment when the child's behavior validated the mother's guidance and ensured the household maintained its social standing. Children were also social spies. They observed not only their mother's tactics, but those of neighbors and peers, noting subtleties in conversation, hierarchy, and unspoken alliances. These observations informed their behavior, allowing them to anticipate reactions, avoid faux pas, and participate strategically in social dynamics. A child could become as adept at subtle diplomacy as their mother, negotiating friendships, playdates, and household rules with a mix of intuition and practiced skill. Parenting also required the management of emotional exposure. Children were trained to conceal annoyance, disappointment, or impatience, particularly in mixed company. Expressing frustration or genuine opinion publicly risked social penalty. Yet in private, children were allowed moments of honest expression, a whispered complaint to a sibling, a quiet laugh at a domestic mishap, or playful rebellion in the backyard. The dichotomy between public composure and private authenticity became a fundamental lesson. The world demanded performance, but there existed a safe space to be oneself. Practicality and preparation were key. Mothers stocked emergency supplies of cookies, tissues, and backup clothing to mitigate potential crises. Children were often prepped for unexpected events, a sudden invitation, a surprise visit from relatives, or an accidental spill with step-by-step instructions for polite handling. These rehearsals ensured that, even under pressure, the household could maintain composure. The mastery of improvisation became as essential as the mastery of formal rules. A notable aspect of child etiquette was the cultivation of awareness toward others' perceptions. From an early age, children were taught to gauge the mood, interests, and expectations of those around them. At meals, at church, or during neighborhood interactions, the child learned that behavior was not purely personal. It was performative, reflecting on the household as a whole. Even small victories, such as remembering to address an adult politely or sharing praise for a sibling, were recognized as meaningful achievements in social literacy. Children were also taught discretion in communication. Secrets, gossip, and information were carefully managed. They learned not to reveal private family matters and to navigate conversations with tact and strategy. This extended beyond words to gestures, expressions, and even posture, a subtle language of social fluency taught from observation and gentle correction. Ultimately, the goal of parenting in the 1,950 seconds was not just to raise polite children, but to cultivate capable, socially aware, and adaptive members of the community. Through careful guidance, consistent rehearsal, and observation, children acquired skills that allowed them to navigate complex social structures with grace. The home became both classroom and stage, shaping behavior through structured rituals, daily practice, and immersive social experiences. Even as we reflect on these practices from a modern perspective, the lessons resonate. The emphasis on awareness, empathy, and adaptive social intelligence speaks to enduring human skills. The intense scrutiny and rigorous etiquette may seem extreme today, but they illustrate the depth of preparation and attention required to navigate an intricate social ecosystem. In essence, children learn to read the world, anticipate challenges, and act with composure skills that transcend time and remain relevant even in contemporary contexts. By the end of the day, children had absorbed lessons not through lectures, but through lived experience, observing, participating, adapting, and occasionally improvising. They became miniature strategists, learning the importance of poise, discretion, and social perception. The household operated as a complex, interwoven network of influence, responsibility, and performance, in which every member, adult and child alike, had a role, a script, and a responsibility to uphold the fragile balance of 1,950 seconds suburban life. In the 1,950 seconds, the telephone was far more than a tool for communication. It was a stage, a social arena, and sometimes a source of genuine anxiety. Unlike today's devices, which allow for text, voicemail, and instant messaging, the rotary phone demanded immediate engagement and perfect poise. One ring could trigger a cascade of preparation, anticipation, and performance. Every call was a test of etiquette, a chance to demonstrate composure, and an opportunity to reinforce the household's reputation. Imagine the scene. The family phone sits prominently in the hallway, often on a small table with a pad reserved for important messages, notes, or doodles. The moment it rings, a sharp, piercing tone cuts through the domestic soundscape. This was a sound that could provoke adrenaline, signaling urgency, social expectation, or even gossip. Answering was a performance, not a casual interaction. The housewife sprinted to the receiver, composed her expression, and prepared to deliver a greeting that balanced warmth, politeness, and authority. Opening lines were not casual. A simple hello would never suffice. The caller expected a full greeting, indicating that the household was present, attentive, and socially aware. Good morning. This is the Thompson residence. How may I help you? They was standard protocol, delivered crisply, with just the right inflection to suggest attentiveness without breathlessness. The tone had to be cheerful, yet measured too eager, might suggest desperation. Too flat might indicate rudeness. And all this, while potentially mid-vacuum or in the middle of kneading dough, was a balancing act requiring finesse and practice. The stakes were high. If the caller was a neighbor, a misstep could ripple through the community, leading to gossip at bridge club or subtle judgment in the produce aisle. If it was a wrong number, the housewife had to handle the faux pas with grace, apologizing profusely and offering helpful guidance without irritation. Even transferring a call was a delicate relay. One misdirected line could result in social friction, silent criticism, or a story retold at the next coffee morning. Children, ever observant, were often enlisted in the silent training of telephone etiquette. They learned to pause, hush, or assist without disrupting the performance. Even the family dog, sensing the tension, might retreat quietly, understanding that a phone call was an event that demanded focus, decorum, and attention. The conversation itself was a choreography. Small talk, weather updates, or inquiries about mutual acquaintances were carefully curated. Every response carried weight, misjudged enthusiasm, or poorly timed laughter could be noted and remembered. If a household member admitted to being in a bath, reading a magazine, or, heaven forbid, lounging in pajamas, it could be interpreted as negligence or social laxity. The appearance of constant composure was mandatory. The consequences of mismanaging the phone were significant. Reputation, influence, and perceived reliability all hung on proper etiquette. A delayed response to an important call could signal irresponsibility. A curt tone might brand a family as rude. Even handling a wrong number required subtlety too casual, and you risked offending. Too elaborate, and the caller might feel patronized. The phone, in effect, became a tool for social diplomacy, with etiquette serving as both shield and sword. Emergency preparedness extended to this domain as well. The housewife had to anticipate visitors or urgent calls while engaged in domestic tasks. Children were trained to recognize cues and act appropriately, fetching a pad, taking a message, or simply maintaining silence. Every call was a performance, observed not only by the person on the line, but by the household itself, each family member enacting their part in the drama of social poise. Calls were rarely private. Conversations unfolded under the scrutiny of those present, whether parents, children, or neighbors peeking through windows. The housewife had to project confidence, readiness, and composure, masking any internal panic or fatigue. Multitasking became an art form, attending the call, maintaining domestic order, and monitoring the social impact of each word spoken. Even routine communications carried social weight. Invitations, thank you calls, or coordination for social events were high-stakes interactions. Promptness, tone, and clarity determined perceptions of reliability and social standing. Missed or mishandled calls could cascade into reputational damage, influencing invitations, favors, and neighborhood influence. The rotary phone was both a tool and a test, proof of a housewife's mastery of etiquette, composure, and multitasking prowess. The housewife's mental preparation was equally critical. Anticipating each caller's intent, mood, and expectations required foresight. Responses were carefully crafted to balance honesty, politeness, and social preservation. A subtle apology here, a carefully chosen phrase there, and a silent acknowledgement of hierarchy ensured that the household maintained its standing. Mistakes were rare, but consequential. Success was measured not by information transmitted, but by impressions maintained. This level of meticulous attention extended beyond the home. Phone etiquette shaped social interactions, influencing the broader community. A well-managed conversation could cement friendships, reinforce alliances, and prevent conflicts. Conversely, a misstep could fuel gossip, misunderstandings, and long-lasting social consequences. Children learned early that even indirect observation of telephone interactions was an educational moment, absorbing nuances, tone, and behavioral cues that would serve them in social life for decades. Comparing this to modern times underscores the evolution of communication. Today, a missed text or voicemail is often inconsequential. Etiquette has relaxed, and informal tone is widely accepted. In the 1,950 seconds, a phone call was both immediate and performative. It was a stage where etiquette, social intelligence, and domestic mastery intersected, demanding attentiveness, preparation, and poise from every household member. Ultimately, phone etiquette, in 1950 secondes, Suburbia, reflected broader societal expectations, constant vigilance, social awareness, and mastery of ritualized behavior. The rotary phone was a microcosm of the era's domestic culture, simultaneously empowering and anxiety-inducing, a daily exercise in patience, composure, and performance art. Every ring, every word, every pause was laden with meaning. To answer correctly was to assert competence, maintain reputation, and navigate the invisible currents of social judgment successfully. In essence, the phone was a mirror of the household itself. How well the call was managed reflected how well the home operated, how well children were trained, and how gracefully the housewife could navigate the intricate lattice of suburban social expectations. By mastering telephone etiquette, a housewife demonstrated control, finesse, and an uncanny ability to turn the mundane into a stage for social excellence. The phone rang, and with it came both challenge and opportunity, a ritual that demanded nothing less than perfection. In the 1,950 seconds suburban landscape, a sudden visit from a neighbor was not merely an interruption, it was a full-blown social ambush. Unlike today, where we might text ahead or shrug off a spontaneous drop-in, the etiquette of the era demanded that housewives instantly transform from domestic multitaskers to poised hosts, flawlessly presenting both their home and family as paragons of order and taste. The arrival of an unexpected visitor tested not only one's composure, but also the mastery of a lifetime of domestic training. Picture the moment. A glint of chrome appears in the driveway. Perhaps it is Mrs. Allen from across the street, her station wagon brimming with her own children and a mysterious pie. Time dilates. There are mere seconds to assess your appearance, the state of your home, and the positioning of every household member. Shoes must be retrieved, skirts smoothed, and aprons straightened. Even the faintest stain on yesterday's housecoat could be a social faux pas with long-lasting consequences. In this scenario, the housewife becomes both director and performer in a carefully orchestrated scene. The living room transforms from casual space to curated stage. Magazines are whisked away, toys discreetly corralled, and furniture subtly adjusted to project the illusion of order. Every surface, tables, counters, and even the piano must appear meticulously maintained, reflecting an aura of domestic competence. It is a high-pressure dance in which timing is critical. Move too slowly, and the visitors notice. Move too quickly, and it appears suspicious. The greeting is crucial. It is not sufficient to offer a casual hello or come in. Every word, every gesture must convey warmth, competence, and hospitality. A bright smile must be paired with appropriate eye contact, while maintaining a sense of calm authority. Children are instructed in advance to behave impeccably, holding positions of silent obedience until prompted. Any sign of chaos, a spilled glass, a wandering child, a misaligned curtain, must be discreetly managed, without disrupting the scene. One of the most harrowing aspects is the evaluation of the home itself. Floors must gleam, furniture dust-free, and decorative items arranged in an aesthetically pleasing but not ostentatious manner. Even the scent of the air matters. The faint aroma of baked goods or freshly polished wood signals care and refinement, while the wrong hint, a lingering smell of burnt toast, for example, could signal neglect. Households often deploy subtle tricks, decoy items, strategically placed decorations, or even temporary rearrangements to hide imperfections. Hospitality extends beyond visual cues. Coffee must be brewed to perfection, cups aligned on the table, and sugar or cream offered first to guests, never to oneself. Any mishandling, from a cracked mug to a misaligned coaster, risks social judgment. Snacks or baked goods, especially homemade items, are presented with care, and the hostess must appear confident regardless of any internal panic or last-minute improvisation. Interactions with the visitors themselves are equally delicate. Conversation requires a blend of polite interest, strategic flattery, and subtle deflection. Gossip is navigated carefully. Sharing too much personal information risks vulnerability, while revealing too little could suggest indifference. Compliments are distributed judiciously, admiration for a neighbor's dress, culinary skills, or garden is expected, but must be delivered with measured enthusiasm. Overly effusive praise can appear insincere, while muted responses may signal envy or neglect. The children's roles are critical. They must demonstrate impeccable manners, answering questions politely, maintaining decorum, and refraining from drawing attention to themselves or the household's imperfections. Even a small misstep, a loud comment, a dropped utensil, or a question out of turn can disrupt the carefully maintained balance of the visit. The housewife's guidance and prior training prepare them to respond with subtle cues, gentle corrections, and practiced gestures of control. Unexpected visitors also pose logistical challenges. The hostess must be ready to offer refreshments, adjust seating, or quickly hide any ongoing domestic work. Every action must be executed as if rehearsed. This includes last-minute adjustments to the home, straightening the sofa cushions, placing decorative items correctly, or retrieving a hidden stash of company-only linens or napkins. Even brief lapses can invite critique from neighbors who are themselves masters of suburban surveillance. The stakes are social, psychological, and reputational. Successfully managing an unannounced visit reinforces the household's image as competent, composed, and socially aware. Failure, even minor, can trigger gossip, subtle ostracization, or repeated scrutiny in future interactions. Households often had contingency plans, emergency gloves, spare linens, or decoy desserts, ensuring that at a moment's notice, the scene could be executed flawlessly. Historically, these unplanned encounters were exercises in improvisation and mental acuity. A housewife could be dusting the piano one moment, folding laundry the next, and within seconds, perform a full-scale welcoming ceremony for unexpected visitors. Her performance included everything from appearance and posture to conversational skill, demonstrating the multifaceted expertise required to navigate 1,950-second suburbia. Modern readers might laugh at the anxiety induced by a surprise visit, yet it highlights the cultural emphasis on appearances, etiquette, and social hierarchy of the era. The housewife's success was not measured by the completion of domestic chores alone, but by the seamless projection of order, grace, and social compliance under pressure. These visits served as both test and affirmation. A successful encounter validated her role, skill, and social position. A misstep could reverberate through the neighborhood's judgmental ecosystem. Even small, everyday objects played symbolic roles. A misplaced throw pillow, an unpolished silver spoon, or a slightly wilted flower arrangement could signal neglect or incompetence. The housewife had to cultivate an almost preternatural awareness of her surroundings, anticipating every detail the visitors might notice. This was a continual exercise in spatial intelligence, social perception, and psychological acuity, requiring vigilance, adaptability, and composure. At the end of the visit, the hostess could finally exhale, but the aftermath demanded reflection and adjustment. Observing the reactions of the visitors provided intelligence for future social interactions. Notes might be taken discreetly, adjustments made for next time, and any minor imperfections addressed immediately. In a sense, each unexpected visit was a rehearsal for the next, an iterative process of social refinement, strategy, and domestic precision. Ultimately, surviving these social ambushes required a balance of performance, improvisation, and psychology. The housewife's mastery of etiquette allowed her to maintain control over both her home and her public persona, demonstrating skill, awareness, and adaptability. In an era defined by rigid expectations and subtle social hierarchies, the unannounced visit was less about hospitality and more about survival. Navigating a labyrinth of social cues, judgment, and domestic artistry. In reflecting on these experiences, we can appreciate the intense complexity and creativity that defined suburban life for 1,950 seconds housewives. These daily tests, whether a simple phone call or an unplanned guest, revealed the invisible labor, strategic intelligence, and resilience required to maintain appearances, navigate social scrutiny, and assert competence in a world where the smallest error could echo across the neighborhood. In the 1,950 seconds, suburban world, domestic prowess extended far beyond the walls of the home. Laundry and lawn care were public performances, arenas in which housewives showcased their diligence, taste, and social standing. Unlike today, when hanging laundry is a private task and lawn care often a shared responsibility, in mid-century suburbia, these acts were charged with symbolism and social consequence. They were not merely chores, they were demonstrations of order, discipline, and visibility. Laundry day was both ritual and spectacle. Before a single sheet was hung, a housewife had to strategize which garments would be displayed front and center and which would remain hidden. Sheets were meticulously starched and folded, pillowcases aligned perfectly, and unmentionables carefully concealed behind towels or behind decorative linens. Even the order in which items were hung on the line mattered, communicating the household's efficiency and pride. Sheets billowed elegantly. Socks were paired with military precision, and every flapping towel or handkerchief became a subtle announcement of domestic skill. Early morning was prime laundry, performance time. The sun's light served as a natural spotlight, highlighting the crispness of linens and the smoothness of hanging clothes. Housewives across the block competed silently, scanning each other's yards, noting deviations or lapses in technique. The subtle signals were numerous. A limp sheet suggested inattentiveness. A crooked row of socks implied disorder, and a visible pair of bloomers was considered a scandal. Every move on the line was observed, interpreted, and socially coded. The process of laundering, from washing to hanging, was meticulous and labor-intensive. With limited technology, an old ice box for chilling items, heavy chrome irons, and early washing machines, housewives relied on technique, timing, and stamina. They planned the order of garments carefully, understanding that an improperly hung sheet could undermine the image of the entire household. Every rotation of the clothespins, every tug to remove wrinkles, reflected hours of domestic training and a keen awareness of neighborhood scrutiny. Similarly, lawn care was a form of social signaling. A freshly mown, well-maintained yard represented control, taste, and adherence to suburban norms. Grass height, flower bed arrangement, and the positioning of decorative items were all read like text by neighbors. One overgrown dandelion or drooping hydrangea could trigger whispered commentary across fences. The housewives' efforts were constant, a cyclical battle between maintaining appearances and managing the practical needs of family life. The etiquette of the yard demanded precision. Roses were dead-headed daily, tulips stood at attention, and marigolds were kept from sprawling. Any sign of decay or neglect suggested a moral lapse or a decline in household management. Composting, while environmentally sound, had to be discreet, and fertilizer use required subtlety to avoid drawing attention to chemical odors. Even the selection and placement of lawn ornaments was strategic. One pink flamingo was charming, 2 could appear tacky, and 3 suggested a surrender to disorder. The stakes were further heightened by social surveillance. Neighbors, armed with binoculars or keen eyesight, monitored yard presentation as a barometer of the household's discipline and social capital. A casual observation by Mrs. Potters, Jensen, or Mr. Tompkins could spark silent rivalry or unwritten commentary at bridge club. Beyond aesthetics, lawn and laundry were communication tools, projecting subtle signals about family values, efficiency, and status. A pristine clothesline and a neatly mowed lawn demonstrated capability, attention to detail, and adherence to community norms. Conversely, errors, negligence, or visible disorder could invite scrutiny, gossip, or social penalties. The invisible currency of public perception was high, and every flap of a sheet or clink of clothespins contributed to a larger social narrative. Even mundane elements, such as the direction in which socks were hung, the alignment of towels, or the positioning of bedsheets on the line, were laden with meaning. A single error could disrupt the delicate balance of neighborhood hierarchy. Households developed strategies for mitigation, decoy items, hidden appliances, and creative folding techniques to project competence while concealing imperfections. Each morning, the suburban stage came alive, and the housewife's performance was both expected and evaluated. The effort required physical endurance, mental acuity, and acute awareness of social dynamics. Balancing heavy loads, coordinating timing with weather conditions, and maintaining composure under observation demanded a skill set that blended athleticism, artistry, and social intelligence. Laundry and lawn were not private endeavors, but public spectacles in which grace, strategy, and presentation determined social standing. Historically, this intense focus on visibility reflected broader cultural norms of post-war America. Conformity, social surveillance, and the careful management of appearances defined community life. The home and its exterior spaces became tools of communication, signaling efficiency, moral character, and adherence to societal expectations. Through laundry and lawn, housewives navigated these norms, displaying skill and reinforcing the values of the era. Ultimately, mastery of laundry and lawn care represented a form of invisible labor with tangible social impact. The housewife who excelled in these domains was rewarded with social approval, respect, and the tacit acknowledgement of competence. Those who faltered risked scrutiny, gossip, or subtle marginalization. The stakes of suburban domesticity were high, and even the simplest tasks carried symbolic weight. For modern audiences, understanding this dynamic illuminates the extraordinary skill and diligence required of 1,950 housewives. What appears today as mundane chores were then intricate performances of social diplomacy, aesthetic judgment, and meticulous labor. Laundry and lawn care were not just practical activities. They were continuous, high-stakes exercises in visibility, competence, and social negotiation. Reflecting on these practices highlights the cultural and historical context of domestic life in post-war America. It underscores how labor, etiquette, and public perception intertwined, creating a complex, performative landscape in which housewives exercised agency, expertise, and resilience. The lawn and clothesline were stages for a nuanced, high-pressure social theater, shaping the rhythm of daily life and the structure of community judgment. In essence, the backyard, clothesline, and meticulously maintained lawn were not mere settings, they were instruments of influence, arenas for silent competition, and showcases of skill, patience, and strategic thinking. Mastery of these spaces demonstrated both domestic and social intelligence, providing the housewife with authority, respect, and a carefully curated public image. In the 1,952nd suburban world, grocery shopping was far more than a simple errand. It was a carefully choreographed social event, a public stage on which housewives demonstrated competence, taste, and adherence to societal norms. Every aisle was fraught with social tension, each encounter potentially fraught with judgment or rivalry. Unlike modern shopping, where convenience often trumps appearance or perception, mid-century markets operated as microcosms of suburban life, with strict, unspoken rules governing behavior, choices, and even timing. The housewife entered the store, armed not just with a shopping list, but with a strategic plan. Every product selected, every interaction observed, became a statement of social standing. The produce section was a first battlefield. Bananas were inspected for ripeness, apples for firmness, and citrus fruits rotated with an almost ceremonial care. Each choice communicated subtle messages about taste, experience, and knowledge. Grabbing the last bunch of parsley or reaching for the final head of lettuce was not merely functional. It risked a glare from another shopper, a silent accusation that you were either overeager or socially unmindful. Etiquette dictated restraint. Housewives could not openly exhibit hunger or impatience, nor could they monopolize popular items. The social consequences of appearing too casual or too hurried were significant. Observers, neighbors, acquaintances, or the ever-watchful store manager judged every move. The wrong product choice could signal thriftiness or extravagance. Buying off-brand tomato soup might mark a subtle rejection of social norms, while choosing a premium item could draw envy or criticism. Even frozen foods, new and convenient at the time, were fraught with risk. Selecting a frozen dinner implied modern efficiency, but too many could signal financial imprudence. Navigating the canned goods aisle was an exercise in diplomacy. Alliances and subtle rivalries manifested as housewives glanced at each other's selections, gauging intentions and social alignment. Purchasing generic peas was safe, but creamed chipped beef required careful concealment to avoid being labeled eccentric or careless. The meat counter posed another challenge. Cuts had to be appropriate, not too expensive to appear showy, not too cheap to appear frugal. Misjudging a purchase could result in whispered commentary or a subtle shift in social standing. Even the dairy aisle was political territory. Whole milk represented tradition and stability. Skim milk suggested modern awareness, and margarine signaled either innovation or questionable taste. Encounters with other shoppers required practiced social skills. A PTA, acquaintance in the cereal aisle, or a neighbor scrutinizing your choices could turn a mundane errand into a test of composure, wit, and social grace. Conversation had to be polite, neutral, and strategically brief. Mentioning your own children's antics or personal frustrations was strictly forbidden. The discussion was always steered to neutral ground, whether local events or the superficial merits of a product. The checkout line, the final stage of this social gauntlet, demanded careful presentation. Items were stacked neatly, labels facing outward, signaling organization, competence, and attention to detail. Smiles were mandatory, and brief, Courteous conversation with the cashier was a subtle performance of civility. Any sign of frustration, distraction, or inattention could be noted and subtly referenced in future neighborhood interactions. The stakes extended beyond immediate judgment. How one navigated the store influenced reputation, future invitations, and neighborhood perception. A housewife's success in this arena demonstrated not only her ability to provide sustenance, but also her capacity to maintain social order and adhere to the unwritten codes of suburban etiquette. Grocery shopping was, therefore, a delicate blend of logistics, social diplomacy, and strategic self-presentation, with each choice carrying weight beyond the immediate task. Modern comparison highlights the stark differences. Today, grocery shopping is often solitary, casual, and guided by convenience or diet. Social stakes are minimal, and mistakes carry little consequence beyond personal inconvenience. In contrast, the 1,952nd suburban shopper was constantly visible, performing a social role with every product selection, interaction, and movement through the store. Success required awareness, precision, and the ability to read subtle social cues. The challenges were compounded by logistical complexities. Shopping lists were meticulously planned to ensure meals for the week while balancing budget, nutrition, and social expectations. Timing was critical. Arriving too early could expose the housewife to scrutiny from early rising neighbors, while arriving too late risked missing prized items and drawing disparaging glances. The need for poise extended to carrying groceries home. Bags were arranged carefully in the car, preventing damage, spillage, or display of subpar items. Each detail contributed to the impression of competence and order. In addition to product selection, there were social rituals to navigate. Exchanges of polite commentary, recognition of acquaintances, and avoidance of potential conflicts required strategy and constant attention. A casual misstep commenting on another's choice or making a disparaging remark about the produce could ripple through the neighborhood, subtly impacting one's reputation. Even a brief interaction with the store manager could be scrutinized, interpreted, and recounted within social circles. This intricate performance demonstrated both skill and endurance. Housewives balanced multiple considerations simultaneously: product quality, price, social perception, and adherence to etiquette. The physical act of shopping, lifting heavy bags, and navigating crowded aisles demanded stamina, while the constant observation required vigilance and acute social intelligence. The seemingly simple task of grocery shopping was therefore a complex interplay of domestic responsibility, social signaling, and community negotiation. Ultimately, the grocery store functioned as an extension of the home, a public arena in which domestic competence and social acumen were on full display. Mastery of this domain demonstrated resourcefulness, awareness, and strategic intelligence. Housewives who navigated these spaces successfully earned social respect, reinforced community bonds, and maintained a reputation for diligence and propriety. Understanding the pressures of 1,950 seconds, grocery shopping illuminates the broader context of suburban life, a world in which public perception, etiquette, and domestic performance were intertwined. Each aisle, each product, and each interaction were opportunities to demonstrate skill, maintain social order, and participate in the subtle, ongoing negotiation of community standards. The grocery store was not just a place to procure food, it was a stage for social performance, a proving ground for competence, and a mirror reflecting the values and expectations of mid-century suburban culture. In essence, the 1,950 seconds housewife's excursion to the market was an exercise in precision, diplomacy, and endurance. Every selection, glance, and conversation was a test of her ability to navigate social pressures and domestic expectations simultaneously. For modern audiences, it is a striking reminder of the invisible labor, social skill, and strategic awareness required of women in an era where even a trip to buy vegetables could carry consequences far beyond the immediate task. If you thought the suburban housewife's life ended with a well-ironed blouse, think again. In the 1,950 seconds, the domestic day extended into the evening and social calendar, where coffee mornings, Tupperware parties, and neighborhood visits became arenas of etiquette, subtle competition, and strategic diplomacy. These gatherings were not casual. They were high-stakes performances where every gesture, every dish, and every word mattered. Coffee mornings were a ritualistic opening act, often beginning mid-morning when neighbors arrived in a choreographed procession. Guests, usually clad in pastel dresses, perfectly coiffed hair, and subtle perfume, brought not just themselves, but also the invisible weight of judgment. A single misstep, an uneven napkin, a slightly burnt cookie, a visible smudge on a plate could ripple across the social fabric of the neighborhood. Hosting a coffee morning required meticulous planning. The table was a stage. Matching china, polished silverware, and carefully arranged pastries communicated competence and taste. Snacks were often either homemade or disguised store-bought treats, transferred into proper tins to preserve the illusion of culinary mastery. Presentation was everything, down to the strategic placement of creamers, sugar bowls, and teaspoons. The smallest detail, like the proper rotation of a coffee pot handle, was a subtle cue of attentiveness and etiquette. Tupperware parties were, perhaps, the apex of this social theater. Far more than a mere demonstration of storage solutions, they were a proving ground for loyalty to modern conveniences, social savvy, and neighborhood standing. Housewives navigated the delicate balance between appearing supportive yet not overindulgent. Buy too little, and you risked being labeled unprogressive. Buy too much, and your spouse might question your judgment. Every order, every interaction with the hostess was a signal to the community that you were competent, modern, and socially aware. The events themselves unfolded like well-rehearsed choreography. Guests were offered drinks, observed product demonstrations, and silently evaluated the ingenuity and taste of their peers. Games, contests, and product tests turned the gathering into both entertainment and social evaluation. Conversation was an exercise in diplomacy. Harmless anecdotes, light humor, and polite commentary masked intense observation and subtle competition. Each housewife, while enjoying the festivities, was simultaneously assessing, being assessed, and performing. Participation required strategic awareness. Accepting leftovers, complimenting the hostess, or making a minor purchase all carried implications. The act of leaving the party demanded finesse, too abrupt, and you appeared rude. Lingering too long, and you risked overexposure. Mastery of these subtleties signaled social competence, whereas mistakes could reverberate through the neighborhood gossip network. Beyond Tupperware and coffee mornings, social gatherings encompassed dinner parties, barbecues, and informal visits, each with its own complex etiquette. Hosting or attending demanded preparation, poise, and performance. Table settings, food presentation, conversational topics, and even laughter were orchestrated to convey refinement and adherence to social norms. A dish with improperly balanced flavors or a misaligned centerpiece could subtly undermine the host's credibility. Conversation was carefully managed. Politics, religion, or personal grievances were avoided in favor of safe topics like weather, school, or minor community news. Children, too, were part of the social performance. They were expected to behave impeccably, participate in polite conversation if prompted, and adhere to rigid etiquette norms. Misbehavior, loudness, or unscripted opinions could reflect poorly on the hostess and disrupt the carefully constructed social narrative. For parents, part of the performance was training the next generation in these unwritten codes of conduct, ensuring the household's social standing remained intact. Even casual interactions, such as answering the telephone or coordinating carpools, were infused with etiquette and strategy. Households performed a delicate balance of accessibility, politeness, and social visibility, ensuring every action reinforced the household's reputation. Missed calls, delayed responses, or casual lapses could have social repercussions, underscoring the omnipresent scrutiny of community life. Beauty salons, too, were extensions of this social theater. Hair appointments were more than grooming. They were opportunities for information exchange, gossip, and subtle judgment. Housewives engaged in careful conversation, balancing friendliness, discretion, and strategic self-presentation. Hairstyles, the quality of a perm, or even the choice of hair accessories became visible markers of status and conformity. At the heart of these gatherings was the concept of social performance. Etiquette, appearance, and behavior were carefully calibrated to project competence, harmony, and refinement. Housewives were constantly negotiating social hierarchies, displaying skill, and signaling adherence to community norms. Every gesture, meal, and arrangement was laden with significance, communicating subtle cues about character, resourcefulness, and status. Comparing this to modern life highlights dramatic differences. Today, social interactions are often casual, relaxed, and mediated through digital channels. In contrast, 1,950 seconds gatherings demanded constant awareness, precise execution, and emotional labor. The consequences of missteps were social scrutiny, gossip, and a potential diminishment of reputation. Participation required skill, endurance, and acute social intelligence, blending domestic competence with performance art. Through this lens, coffee mornings, Tupperware parties, and social gatherings were more than pleasant diversions. They were arenas for demonstrating mastery over domestic, social, and logistical challenges. Housewives navigated these environments with strategy, grace, and resilience, balancing multiple demands while maintaining appearances. Their labor was both visible and invisible, shaping perceptions and securing social capital. Understanding the nuances of these gatherings reveals the extraordinary pressures and skills involved in suburban domestic life. Behind the smiles, pastries, and polite conversation lay constant vigilance, strategic thinking, and social acumen. Every event was a microcosm of broader societal expectations, where competence, etiquette, and visibility determined standing and influence. In essence, social gatherings of the 1,950 seconds were intricate performances requiring precision, diplomacy, and endurance. The successful housewife managed her household, presented meals flawlessly, navigated complex social cues, and ensured her family upheld community expectations. Each coffee morning, Tupperware party, or dinner event was both a test and a triumph, a demonstration of the delicate art of suburban survival and the subtle, relentless pressures of mid-century etiquette. By examining these rituals, modern audiences gain insight into the labor, skill, and resilience that define the housewife's role, revealing a complex interplay between domestic responsibility, social expectation, and public performance. These gatherings were not merely social. They were stages for asserting competence, reinforcing norms, and mastering the art of survival in a world defined by observation, judgment, and subtle competition. As we draw the curtains on our journey through the labyrinth of 1,950 seconds suburban life, It is clear that being a housewife was no ordinary job. It was a full-time performance, a test of patience, poise, and social strategy. From the precise selection of gloves to the delicate balancing of breakfast plates, the daily choreography of making beds, ironing linens, and arranging meals, to the intricate dance of social gatherings, every action carried meaning. Even a misplaced napkin or a slightly crooked hemline could ripple through the community, subtly shifting perceptions and testing a woman's social acumen. The life of a 1,950 seconds housewife was a paradox. Outwardly serene, meticulously controlled, yet internally brimming with tiny battles, quiet victories, and constant vigilance. She navigated unspoken rules with strategic finesse, balancing her family's needs with the invisible expectations of neighbors, friends, and in-laws. Each day was a series of high-stakes performances, where skill, grace, and discretion were as vital as any tangible task. Yet, beyond the humor, the absurdity, and the sometimes crushing expectations, there is a lesson for us today. In a world that now celebrates casual comfort, digital efficiency, and multitasking without scrutiny, it is easy to overlook the immense labor, emotional, social, and practical, that women once carried. Recognizing the dedication, resourcefulness, and subtle intelligence required to thrive in such a structured, highly observed environment allows us to appreciate the evolution of domestic life, gender roles, and social norms. We also see the value of empathy, patience, and strategic thinking skills that remain relevant even in our modern lives. Whether coordinating family routines, hosting social gatherings, or simply keeping our own spaces in order, the careful attention to detail, the balance of diplomacy, and the grace under pressure practiced by 1,950 seconds, housewives can inspire us to navigate today's challenges with calm, intelligence, and a touch of humor. So, next time you pour your coffee, fold your laundry, or host a small gathering, remember, behind every casual gesture lies a long history of effort, etiquette, and survival. And while the gloves, the gelled hair, and the perfectly ironed napkins may belong to another era, the ingenuity, resilience, and quiet courage of those women belong to all of us. Thank you for joining me today on this journey back in time. I hope you laughed, reflected, and gained a new appreciation for the complex lives behind those seemingly simple 1,950 seconds homes. Remember, history is not just about dates and events. It is about the lived experiences, the small victories, and the lessons we can carry forward. Until next time, stay curious, embrace the little absurdities of life, and keep exploring the hidden stories that shape our past and our present. Goodbye, and take care.